Go home. We'll have a meal sent over. The words hang in the cool, conditioned air of the lobby, glittering and sharp like the glass walls around us. They don't sound real. They sound like a line from a movie, spoken by a character I'm supposed to hate. But the mouth they came from belongs to Chloe, my daughter-in-law, and her eyes, the color of a winter sky, are looking right at me. Her smile is a thin, perfect, unforgiving line. My heart, which had been thrumming with a pride so big it felt like it could lift the whole building, simply stops. It's a physical sensation. A full stop. The blood in my veins feels like it's turned to slush. Your presence here, she continues, her voice a soft, cultured murmur designed not to carry. It doesn't fit the brand's forward-thinking image. This is a space for innovators, for the future. She places a hand on the sleeve of my coat, the one I'd spent a week deciding on. The fabric suddenly feels old and cheap under her manicured fingers. The gesture is meant to be kind, a comforting pat, but it feels like a brand. A mark of dismissal. I followed the signs for the Nourricia grand opening from the moment my taxi dropped me at the curb. The building itself was a monument to the future Chloe was talking about. A sleek, soaring tower of steel and glass that pierced the Austin sky. The logo, a stylized green leaf cradled in a digital circuit, was projected onto the marble floor of the lobby. It was everywhere. On the lapels of the staff, on the screens that flickered with images of vibrant, healthy food, on the impossibly thin cocktail napkins. My son's logo. My son's building. My money. I had dressed so carefully. A simple navy blue dress, my late husband David's favorite pearl earrings. I even bought new, sensible shoes that still pinched my feet. I wanted to look like a mother. A proud mother. I didn't want to stand out, just to be a quiet, happy presence in the corner, watching my son step into the brilliant light he deserved. The light I had paid for. The light his father's work had ignited. The taxi ride over had been a blur of memories. I remembered Ethan as a boy, sitting at our kitchen table, struggling with his math homework while the smell of David's experimental stews filled the house. David, bless his soul, would be hunched over his notebooks, scribbling formulas and nutritional compositions, convinced he could solve the world's health problems one recipe at a time. Ethan used to call it Dad's smelly science. Now, that smelly science was the foundation of a billion-dollar empire. The pride was a physical thing, a warmth that started in my chest and spread to my fingertips. My son. He did it. He took our humble dreams and spun them into this glass and steel reality. The lobby was buzzing. Young, beautiful people with sharp haircuts and expensive shoes held glasses of champagne. Their voices a low, confident hum. They all looked like they belonged. They were the innovators. The future. I felt a small, unfamiliar pang of otherness. I was a relic here. A black and white photograph in a gallery of holographic art. But it didn't matter. I was Ethan's mother. That was my ticket, my all-access pass. I approached the check-in desk, a long white counter manned by a young woman with a glowing tablet. I'm here for Ethan, I said, my voice a little too loud, a little too eager. I'm Nevaeh. His mother. The young woman offered a polite, professional smile. Last name. It should be under his. I'm his mother. She tapped on the screen. Her brow furrowed slightly. I'm sorry, I don't see a Nevaeh on the list. Oh, there must be a mistake, I said, my own smile starting to feel tight. He knew I was coming. I'm his mother. I repeated it as if the words themselves had a magical power that could correct this digital error. A man in a sharp black suit with an earpiece materialized beside me. He was tall and broad, a human wall. Is there a problem, ma'am? No problem, I said quickly. Just a little mix-up with the list. My son Ethan, he's the CEO. He's expecting me. The security guard looked from me to the young woman. His expression didn't change. It was a mask of professional neutrality. I'm sorry, ma'am. If your name isn't on the list, I can't let you in. My face grew hot. People were starting to glance over. The low hum of conversation seemed to dip, their attention drawn to the old woman in the navy dress arguing at the door. I felt my carefully constructed composure begin to crack. Panic, cold and sharp, pricked at the edges of my numbness. This was a mistake. A simple, silly oversight. Ethan was busy. The launch of a company this big, things get missed. Of course. Could you just let him know I'm here? I pleaded, my voice smaller now. Nevaeh. His mother. The guard's jaw was set. I can't leave my post, ma'am. And that's when I saw her. Chloe gliding through the crowd like a swan, a glass of champagne held perfectly in her hand. She was wearing a white dress that looked like it had been sculpted from light. She saw me, and for a fleeting, terrible second, I saw a flicker of annoyance in her eyes before the perfect, thin smile snapped into place. Nevaeh, she said, her voice smooth as silk. I was wondering when you'd get here. She turned to the guard. It's all right, Marcus. I'll handle this. Relief washed over me so potent it made me dizzy. Oh, Chloe, thank you. There was some silly mix-up with the list. She nodded, not at me but at the guard. Thank you, Marcus. He gave a slight nod and stepped back, but he didn't leave. He was still watching. Chloe led me a few steps away from the desk, into a small alcove by a towering green plant that was probably somehow also digital. Her smile didn't waver, but it didn't reach her eyes. Nevaeh, we're so glad you wanted to come. It means a lot. I wouldn't miss it for the world, I said, my heart starting to beat again. To see Ethan up there after all the hard work. After everything. Exactly, Chloe said, and the word was a blade. It's about the work. The brand. The image we're projecting. It's all about looking forward. She took a delicate sip of her champagne. And then she said it. The words that stopped my heart. Your presence here, it doesn't fit the brand's forward-thinking image. I stared at her. I must have misheard. The music, the chatter, it must have muffled her words. I don't understand. This is a space for innovators, she explained patiently, as if to a child. Tech journalists, investors, influencers. It's a very specific demographic. We've curated this evening very carefully. The optics are everything. Optics. Curated. The words were sterile, corporate. They had nothing to do with a mother's pride. But I'm his mother. The words sounded hollow now, stripped of their power. And he loves you for that, she said, patting my arm. The brand. The dismissal. But tonight is about Nourish AI. It's about a clean, modern, future-focused aesthetic. An old-fashioned, homey presence. It just sends the wrong message. It connects the brand to the past, and we are all about the future. The past. I was the past. David was the past. The sold house was the past. The $750,000 of retirement money, every cent I had in the world, was the past. All of it, the foundation of this glittering glass tower, was just a past to be scrubbed clean. Through the glass wall behind her I could see the main event space. And there on a minimalist stage, bathed in a soft green spotlight, was Ethan. My son. He was holding a microphone, talking to the adoring crowd. He was animated, charming, confident. He looked like the king of the world. Our world. The one I gave him. The one David died creating. He laughed at something, a flash of white teeth. He looked so much like his father in that moment, and the pain of it was a physical blow. Did he know I was out here? Did he authorize this? Was he watching on some security camera as his wife turned his own mother away from the door of his triumph? The thought was so monstrous I couldn't hold it in my mind. I just wanted to see him, I whispered. My throat was tight. And you will, Chloe said brightly. We'll have you over for a proper dinner soon. Once all this launch craziness dies down. Her promise was as empty as her smile. For now, the best thing you can do to support him is to let tonight be about the brand. She gestured vaguely towards the exit with her champagne flute. The message was clear. Go home, she said, the final gentle execution. We'll have a meal sent over. A meal. From Nourish AI. One of their pre-packaged, algorithmically perfected health meals. The irony was so bitter it burned my throat. I would be sent home and fed a product made from my husband's stolen genius, paid for with my life savings, as a consolation prize for being too old and too homey to be seen at their party. I didn't say anything else. There was nothing to say. The blood had returned to my veins, but it was ice cold. A strange calm settled over me. The calm of profound, irreversible shock. My body was a shell, and I was watching this scene from a great distance. I saw an old woman in a navy dress nod mutely. I saw her turn, her movements stiff and slow. As I walked towards the automatic glass doors, I didn't look back at Chloe. I didn't look at the guard. I kept my eyes fixed on the stage, visible through the archway. Ethan was still talking, his arms gesturing wide, embracing his new world. For a single gut-wrenching moment, his eyes scanned the crowd and seemed to pass right over the lobby entrance. Right over me. There was no flicker of recognition. No sign that he saw the ghost of his past being escorted out of his future. I was invisible. I had been erased. The glass doors slid open with a soft whoosh, and the cool, sterile air of the party was replaced by the warm, humid Texas night. The sounds of the city, the traffic on the street, felt alien. I stood on the pavement, the magnificent glass tower looming behind me, a tombstone for a life I no longer recognized. My reflection stared back at me from the polished black marble of the exterior wall, a small, stooped figure. A woman not on the list. A car pulled up, one of the Blacktown cars hired for the event, likely to take some innovator home. The driver looked at me, his expression questioning. I shook my head and walked past, towards the distant glow of the main street where I could hail a regular taxi. I didn't want their car. I didn't want any part of their curated world. The pinching in my new shoes was the only thing that felt real. That, and the echo of Chloe's words. Go home. A meal will be sent over. The past is not welcome in the future. My name is Nevaeh. I am 72 years old, and for most of those years, my world was defined by the scent of baking bread and the quiet scratching of a pen on paper. I am a widow now. My life's work was never celebrated in boardrooms or featured in magazines. It was measured in the satisfied size of a family well fed, in the warmth of a kitchen that was always the true heart of our home. My hands, now spotted with age, spent decades kneading dough, shelling peas and stirring pots. This was my craft, my love language. My late husband, David, he was the scientist, a brilliant, gentle nutritionist who saw the world not as flavors and textures, but as a beautiful, intricate dance of proteins, vitamins, and minerals. Our home in San Antonio wasn't large, but it was filled to the brim with love and his life's work. His office was a chaotic cathedral of paper. Stacks of books on biochemistry leaned precariously, and dozens of leather-bound journals covered every surface. Those journals, they were his soul. He filled them with elegant, precise handwriting, page after page of formulas and algorithms for perfectly balanced meals. He wasn't just creating recipes, he was mapping the very architecture of health. He believed food could be medicine, that the right combination of nutrients could heal the body from the inside out. I was his first and most devoted student. He would emerge from his study, eyes bright with discovery, holding a page of frantic calculations. Nevaeh, my love, he'd say. I think I've cracked the optimal absorption rate for lycopene if we pair it with a specific monounsaturated fat. And I would take his beautiful sterile science and translate it into a sun-ripened tomato soup, with a drizzle of our finest olive oil. He was the mind and I was the heart. Together we made a whole life. When we lost David, the silence in the house was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. The quiet was a physical weight. The kitchen felt too big. His study a hollowed-out memory. For a time I felt like a ghost in my own home. A keeper of a legacy no one else understood. Then Ethan came to me. My son. He had David's sharp eyes but a different kind of fire in them. Not the quiet, steady flame of scientific inquiry, but the hungry, crackling fire of ambition. He sat at my kitchen table, the same table where David had explained the Krebs cycle to him using orange slices, and he laid out his grand vision. He talked about technology, about AI, about scalability and market disruption. He used words I didn't fully understand, but his passion was a language I knew well. He wanted to take his father's work, our work, and bring it to the world. He called it Nourish AI. He said he'd build an algorithm, a genius AI that could create personalized, perfectly nutritious meals for everyone, delivered to their door. He said it would be a revolution. It's Dad's dream, Mom. he'd said, his hand covering mine on the worn oak of the table. But bigger. We can change the world. And I, a mother who saw her brilliant husband in her ambitious son's eyes, I believed him. Hope is a powerful, blinding thing. The thought that David's legacy might not just live on, but flourish and help millions, it was a balm on my grieving soul. So I did what any mother would do. I gave him everything. We sold our family home in San Antonio, the one David and I had bought as newlyweds, the one with the scuff marks on the doorframe marking Ethan's height through the years. I walked through the empty rooms, my footsteps echoing with the ghosts of 30 years of laughter, arguments, and anniversaries. I packed away the photo albums, the hand-painted pottery, the life we had so carefully built. Then I went to the bank and liquidated my retirement account, the nest egg David had so meticulously planned for our golden years together. Every cent, $750,000. The entire sum of our life's work, our security, our past and our future, handed over in a single cashier's check. I remember the look on Ethan's face. It wasn't gratitude, not really. It was triumph. The look of a man who has just acquired a key asset. Now I live here. In this gray, soulless box of a condo he rents for me on the outskirts of Austin. Everything is chrome and glass and shades of beige. It smells of nothing, of new paint and industrial cleaner. There are no scuff marks on the walls, no worn spots on the armchairs. There are no memories here. My life, my actual life, feels like it's being held in escrow. I am a ghost, subsidized by the ghost of my own fortune. I walk through these silent, immaculate rooms, a relic from a past that was sold off to fund a future I am not welcome in. My son, the billionaire, sends a sterile automated payment for my rent each month. A transaction. An expense on a balance sheet. And I, his mother, the architect of his resources, I am just a liability he has to maintain. On the lonely nights, the ones where the silence of this place presses in on me, I see David's journals in my mind's eye. I can feel the worn, supple leather of their covers under my fingertips, smell the dry, sweet scent of aging paper and ink. I can picture his elegant, sloping handwriting, the complex diagrams of protein chains that looked like constellations, the meticulously calculated algorithms for vitamin absorption. He called them his maps to a better life. They were his art, his symphony. I remember Ethan as a teenager, all lanky limbs and simmering resentment. He'd once picked up a journal from David's desk, flipped through it with a bored expression, and tossed it back down. "It's just Dad's weird food diary," he'd scoffed, before plugging his headphones back in. Shutting out the world his father was so desperate to understand and improve. The memory is so clear, it stings like a fresh wound. That casual, thoughtless dismissal. Tonight, the silence is particularly loud. I can't sleep. I find myself sitting in the dark, my laptop casting a pale, cold light on my face. Out of a morbid, painful curiosity I can't quite name, I navigate to the Nourish AI website. It's slick, all clean lines and smiling, impossibly fit people. The marketing copy is full of buzzwords: synergy, biohacking, optimization. It feels a million miles away from my warm kitchen and David's cluttered, ink-stained desk. I click on the Our Technology tab. The page loads and my breath catches in my throat. There, in a crisp sans serif font, is a description of their proprietary algorithm. They write about a revolutionary system that maps the synergistic relationship between micronutrients and calculates optimal bioavailability based on individual metabolic profiles. They boast of a unique process that cross-references nutrient density with enzymatic pathways to create meals that are not just food, but cellular fuel. The words on the screen begin to blur, but my mind sees them with perfect clarity. I'm not reading corporate jargon. I'm reading David's life. Synergistic relationship between micronutrients, that was chapter 12 of his third journal, his groundbreaking work on how iron absorption is quadrupled in the presence of vitamin C. Optimal bioavailability, that was his term, the one he was so proud of, the core of his entire philosophy. Cellular fuel. He whispered those exact words to me one night, sketching a diagram on a napkin at our kitchen table, his eyes alight with the fire of pure discovery. It's all there. Paragraph by painstaking paragraph. My husband's work, his voice, his very thought process, repackaged and sold as a stroke of technological genius. My son hadn't built upon his father's work. He hadn't been inspired by it. He had simply opened the journals, typed them up, and put his own name on the cover. The casual disdain of the teenager had morphed into the calculated theft of the man. The boy who called them weird food diaries was now the titan of industry who presented them as his own invention. A cold, dreadful certainty settles in my stomach, heavy as a stone. Ethan didn't just take my money. He didn't just take our home and our security. He reached back into the past, into the quiet sanctity of his father's study, and he plundered his grave. He stole his soul. My world shrank to the size of my hand. A cold, glass rectangle 5 inches from corner to corner, that became my only window to the life I had built and been banished from. It was my cathedral and my prison. I existed in the blue glow of the screen, a ghost haunting the digital edges of my own family. My days were measured not by sunrises or sunsets, but by the relentless scroll of my thumb. The silence in this condo, this beige soundproofed box Ethan called a luxury retirement apartment, was a living thing. It was thick, heavy, pressing in on my eardrums. The air conditioning hummed at a constant 72 degrees, a temperature I couldn't change. The smart thermostat was locked, controlled from an app on Chloe's phone. A small thing, a meaningless detail, but it was my first lesson in this new life. I was no longer the master of my own climate. I was an asset to be managed, a plant to be watered on a schedule. I'd sit in the armchair, the one piece of furniture from my old house they'd allowed me to keep, and I'd watch them. On Instagram, the feed was a torrent of success, a performance of happiness so perfect it felt violent. There was Chloe, her teeth impossibly white, leaning against the hood of a brand new Rivian SUV, the color of polished river stone. The caption read, "Making sustainable choices for our family's future. Nourish AI future forward." Our family. The words were a tiny sharp jab. I wondered if she'd felt it, that little sting of hypocrisy, as she typed it with her perfectly manicured fingers. I doubted it. Then there was Ethan. My son. My boy. Pictured on a Twitch stream with some famous gamer, a kid half his age with neon green hair. Ethan was wearing a headset, a Nourish AI branded hoodie, and a practiced, easy smile. He was talking about disrupting the legacy food industry and optimizing human potential through algorithmic nutrition. Legacy. He used that word a lot. He spoke it as if it were something to be torn down, demolished, rather than something to be honored. He never mentioned David. He never mentioned the stacks of worn, leather-bound journals that formed the very soul of his billion-dollar company. They were his legacy. David's legacy. My legacy. Every post was a fresh cut. A photo of them on a black sand beach in Iceland, Chloe's arms wrapped around his neck, the northern lights swirling above them. "Chasing magic with my one and only," she wrote. I remembered chasing fireflies with a 5-year-old Ethan in our backyard, his shrieks of laughter echoing in the twilight. A video of my grandson Leo, taking his first steps on the gleaming white marble floor of their new mansion. They called it a smart home. It looked like a museum, cold, vast, and empty. Chloe's voice cooed from behind the camera. "Good job, my sweet boy. Such a big, independent man." I hadn't seen Leo in 6 months. I was a grandmother who only existed on a screen. They had a dog, a golden retriever puppy named Algo, short for algorithm. They posted endless pictures of it. Algo sleeping on a $1,000 dog bed. Algo chewing on a designer toy. Algo wearing a tiny Nourish AI bandana. They got more likes, more adoring comments for that dog than I had received birthday cards in the last 5 years. "You two are the cutest family," one comment read. "Goals," said another. I would scroll through the hundreds of comments from strangers, all of them applauding the beautiful lie my life savings had paid for. Each heart emoji was a tiny hammer tap against my chest. The worst were the pictures of the food. Not their own, of course. They never ate the prepackaged meals their company sold to the masses. Their feed was a catalog of Michelin star restaurants. Tiny, artful plates of food. Foams, gels, and reductions. Things David would have scoffed at. He believed in nourishment, in the simple, profound power of real ingredients. He believed food was about family, about sitting around a worn wooden table, not about posting a filtered photo for an audience of strangers. One night I couldn't sleep. The silence in the condo was buzzing. I was scrolling as always. Ethan had posted a picture of himself in his new office. It was a corner office, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Austin skyline. He was sitting in a sleek, ergonomic chair, staring thoughtfully at a bank of monitors, a cup of coffee in his hand. The caption was the pinnacle of his self-appointed genius. Building the future one bite at a time. It's in the DNA of this company to look forward, to innovate, to create a new legacy. That word again. Legacy. The arrogance of it, the deliberate erasure of the past, finally broke something in me. My hands were trembling but my mind was clear. I tapped on the comment field. The little cursor blinked, waiting. I thought about all the things I could write. A torrent of rage, of pain, of betrayal. But I didn't. I chose my words with the precision of a surgeon. I wrote, "Your father would have been so proud you found his journals. His legacy lives on." I hit post. For a few minutes it was just there. A single quiet truth in a sea of glittering falsehoods. My comment sat under a string of, "You're an inspiration, man," and "Keep crushing it." I felt a strange, light-headed sense of victory. I had spoken. I had inserted a crack in the perfect facade. I imagined Chloe seeing it. I imagined the flash of panic in her eyes, the quick, sharp intake of breath. I imagined her turning the phone to Ethan, her perfectly glossed lip curled in a snarl. "Your mother," she would hiss. I refreshed the page. It was gone. My comment had vanished as if it had never existed. I scrolled up and down, my heart pounding. Nothing. I went back to the main feed and tapped on Ethan's profile picture. An error message appeared. User not found. I tried Chloe's. The same. I had been digitally executed. Deleted. Blocked. The window was slammed shut, the curtains drawn. They hadn't just removed my words. They had removed my existence. I was no longer even allowed to be a ghost. The silence that followed was different. It was no longer a heavy, oppressive weight. It was a void. A complete and total absence of connection. My world, which had shrunk to a 5-inch screen, now shrank to the 4 beige walls of my condo. The days blurred into one long gray smear of nothing. There were no more pictures of Leo, no more updates on Algo, no more dispatches from their perfect, curated life. There was only the hum of the air conditioner and the steady, maddening beat of my own heart. Then the calendar turned. The days, which had been meaningless, suddenly coalesced around a single date. My birthday. My 73rd. I woke up that morning and the silence was mocking. David had always made such a fuss. He'd make me his special blueberry pancakes, the ones with a hint of lemon zest, and bring them to me in bed. He'd sing a loud off-key version of Happy Birthday, and the whole house would smell of coffee and love. Ethan, as a boy, would clamber onto the bed, presenting me with a hand-drawn card, his face beaming with pride. Now there was nothing. The phone, which had once been a source of constant pain, was now a dead object on the nightstand. No calls, no texts, not even a perfunctory email. I spent the day staring out the window at the manicured lawn of the retirement complex, watching other families come and go, their arms filled with gifts and flowers. I ate a piece of toast for lunch. I watched the dust motes dance in the afternoon sun. I felt a grief so profound it was physical, an ache deep in my bones. By 9 p.m. I had given up. The sun had set. The condo was dark, save for the faint glow of a street lamp outside. I had wrapped myself in one of David's old sweaters, trying to find some remnant of his warmth. I was about to go to bed, to let the day officially die, when I heard it. A faint, high-pitched whirring sound growing closer. I went to the window. A small drone, its lights blinking red and green, was hovering outside my patio door. It lowered a small, cube-shaped box onto the welcome mat, then ascended silently back into the night sky. A delivery. My heart gave a foolish, hopeful flutter. Maybe they remembered. Maybe this was a surprise. A peace offering. I opened the door. The box was white and minimalist with the sleek sans serif Nourish AI logo on the side. The air went out of my lungs. It wasn't a gift. It was a product. I brought it inside and set it on the kitchen counter. My hands were numb as I opened the lid. Inside, nestled in a molded plastic tray, was a single sealed container of soup. Next to it was a printed receipt. The soup was lukewarm to the touch. I peeled back the plastic film. It was lentil soup, a bland brownish-gray puree. It was one of David's first recipes, one of the simplest from his early journals. He'd created it for elderly patients who had trouble swallowing, a basic, nutrient-dense meal. It was the recipe of a compassionate scientist, not a tech disruptor. Seeing it mass-produced, packaged in plastic, felt like a desecration. Then I saw the note. It wasn't a separate card. It was a line of text printed at the bottom of the receipt, in the same cold, generic font as the order details. It read, HBD. Stay healthy. E. HBD. Not happy birthday. He couldn't even be bothered to type the 2 words. Stay healthy. The company's slogan. Command, not a wish. A sterile corporate platitude delivered to the woman who gave him life. E. A single initial. The signature of a busy executive signing off on a memo, not a son writing to his mother. I stared at those 6 letters, 2 abbreviations, and a single initial. The insult was so profound, so utterly dismissive. It scalded me more than the soup ever could. This wasn't an olive branch. It wasn't even an afterthought. It was a calculated, efficient, and utterly heartless gesture. It was a piece of inventory dispatched from a warehouse. It was him telling me in the clearest possible terms what I was to him now. A liability, a mailing address, a problem solved with a $12 meal and a drone delivery. He had taken my husband's work, my life savings, my home, and my future. He had erased me from his life, blocked me from his world, and now he had sent me the bastardized, soulless version of his father's legacy as a birthday gift. He had turned an act of love into an act of commerce. He had turned my grief into a customer service ticket. Something inside me shifted. The deep, aching sorrow that had been my constant companion for months began to recede. It wasn't a sudden, violent explosion of anger. It was a slow, quiet freezing. The grief in my heart, hot and liquid and messy, began to crystallize. It grew cold. It grew hard. It sharpened into a single perfect point. I picked up the lukewarm container of soup and walked to the kitchen sink. I peeled back the lid and poured the bland, gray slurry down the drain. I watched it swirl and disappear. And as the last of it vanished, I made a silent promise to the memory of my husband, and to the woman I used to be. They had left me with nothing. They were wrong. They had left me with a reason. The war wasn't over. It had just begun. The silence in the small rented apartment was a physical weight. It pressed down on my chest, settled in my bones. For weeks I had moved through my days like a ghost, haunted by the echoing emptiness where my life used to be. The news articles about Nourish AI, the glowing profiles of Ethan and Chloe, were digital daggers, each one a fresh twist in the wound. Grief had turned to a cold, hard knot of rage in my stomach, but it was a useless rage, a fire with no fuel. It was consuming me from the inside out. I couldn't fight a billion-dollar corporation. I couldn't fight my own son. I couldn't even get past his security guard. I was 73 years old and I was utterly, completely alone. But then, a name surfaced from the fog of my despair. Maya. My other son, Robert, had passed away years ago from a sudden heart attack, leaving behind his daughter. Maya. I hadn't seen her much since Robert's funeral. She was in Austin at the university. A flash of purple hair at a family Christmas 5 years ago. A quick mind that always seemed to be working 3 steps ahead of everyone else. She was Robert's daughter. She had his integrity, his fire. My fingers, trembling slightly, found my phone. I scrolled through contacts I hadn't touched in years, my thumb hovering over her name. It felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. Making this call meant admitting the full, humiliating scope of my failure. It meant pulling her into my darkness. But the alternative, this suffocating silence, was a slow death. I pressed the call button. She answered on the second ring. Her voice bright and full of the easy energy of youth. Grandma? Is everything okay? The dam broke. The carefully constructed composure I wore like a shroud crumbled, and the story poured out of me. It wasn't a neat linear narrative. It was a torrent of pain, a chaotic confession of the gala. The security guard, Chloe's cruel words, the apartment that felt like a cage. I told her about the money, all of it, the $750,000 that represented my entire life with David, cashed out and handed over on a promise. And then the worst part. The part that felt like sacrilege to even speak aloud. I told her about David's journals. I described the worn leather, the scent of old paper and ink, the dense pages filled with his elegant, precise handwriting. I explained how his life's work, his very soul, was now being marketed as Ethan's proprietary algorithm. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Not a disconnected silence, but a heavy, charged one. I could almost hear the gears turning in her mind, the bright energy of her voice condensing into something sharp and dangerous. When she finally spoke, the lightness was gone, replaced by a low, furious calm that sent a shiver down my spine. "That son of a bitch," she said, the words clipped and cold as ice. "He didn't just steal your money, Grandma. He stole Grandpa's legacy." I don't know what to do, Maya," I whispered, the fight draining out of me again, replaced by the familiar tide of helplessness. "He's untouchable." "No," she said, and the word was a steel blade. "No one is untouchable. They're just protected. He built his kingdom on lies and code, on a story he sold to investors. It's all digital. It's all an image. It looks strong, but I bet it's brittle as hell." She paused and I could hear her pacing. "Grandma, they built a digital kingdom. We'll build a real one. And then we'll burn theirs to the ground." For the first time in months, a flicker of warmth touched the frozen landscape of my heart. It wasn't hope, not yet. It was something far more primal. It was the promise of a reckoning. Maya was a whirlwind. Within a day, she had found a lawyer through the university's legal aid clinic. A young man named Mr. Davis who offered pro bono consultations for seniors. We met him in a small, stuffy office downtown that smelled of stale coffee and disinfectant. The room was cramped, filled with beige filing cabinets and stacks of legal binders that seemed to lean in on us. Mr. Davis was earnest, with kind eyes and a slightly rumpled suit, but as I laid out the story for a second time, I saw the professional sympathy in his face slowly curdle into a look of weary resignation. He steepled his fingers and leaned back in his squeaking chair, looking at me over the top of his glasses. "Mrs. Evans," he began, his tone gentle but firm, "I understand your pain. What your son did is, on a moral level, reprehensible. But on a legal level..." He sighed, a long drawn-out sound of defeat. "It's complicated." He explained it to us in a calm, methodical monotone that stripped all the emotion from my tragedy and left only the cold, hard facts of the law. The money, the $750,000, was the biggest hurdle. "You said you signed documents, a digital agreement of some kind?" "Yes," I said. "Ethan said it was just a formality for his investors, to show where the seed money came from. I trusted him." "Did you have your own lawyer review these documents?" I felt my face flush with shame. "No. He's my son. I didn't think." Mr. Davis nodded, his expression unchanging. He had clearly heard this story or one like it 100 times before. "Without counsel, and with your signature on the document, the court will almost certainly view that transfer as an ironclad gift. Proving coercion or undue influence after the fact, especially against a family member when there was no history of abuse, is an uphill battle. A nearly vertical one." Maya leaned forward, her hands clenched into fists on her knees. "What about my grandfather's journals? That's intellectual property theft, plain and simple. The core of their billion-dollar company is based on his work." "And can you prove that?" Mr. Davis countered, his gaze shifting to Maya. "Do you have copies of the journals? Were his theories ever published, patented, or copyrighted?" "No," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. "David was a private man. He didn't trust corporations. He wanted his work to be pure, to be used for good, not for profit. The journals are all that exist." "And who has possession of these journals now?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Ethan does," I said. "They were in the house. The house I sold for him." Mr. Davis spread his hands in a gesture of futility. "So, the only evidence of the alleged theft is in the possession of the man you're accusing." He will claim they were a father's gift, a family legacy he was building upon. It becomes your word against his. And he has a team of the best corporate lawyers in the country. We have me and a story. In a courtroom, the better funded story almost always wins. He let the words hang in the airless room. The beige walls seemed to press in closer. The hope Maya had ignited felt like a dying ember. So you're saying there's nothing we can do? Maya's voice was sharp with disbelief. I'm saying the system as it's designed protects people like your uncle, Mr. Davis said, his tone softening with a hint of genuine regret. It's built to enforce contracts and protect property, even when the means of acquiring them are distasteful. You can fight, but it will be long, it will be expensive, and the most likely outcome is that you will lose and be left with nothing but significant legal fees. I'm sorry. We walked out of the law office and into the harsh Texas sunlight. The city noise, the traffic, the chatter of people on the sidewalk, it all sounded distant, muffled, as if I were underwater. The lawyer's words echoed in my head. The system is designed to protect predators like him. It wasn't just my son who had betrayed me. It was the whole world, with its rules and its documents and its cold, impartial cruelty. I felt a profound, soul-crushing defeat. Maya was talking, saying something about other options, about not giving up, but I couldn't hear her. The fire she had started in me was extinguished, drowned in a flood of bureaucratic hopelessness. That night sleep wouldn't come. I lay in the dark, the sterile silence of the apartment amplifying the roar of self-recrimination in my mind. The lawyer's words had unlocked a door to a part of my past I had kept sealed for decades. Doubt, thick and suffocating as smoke, filled my lungs. Was this all Ethan's fault? Or was I the one who had given him the matches? My mind drifted back, unbidden, to a sunlit afternoon 25 years ago. Ethan was 16. I'd been getting ready to go to the grocery store, reaching into my purse on the kitchen counter for my wallet. It felt lighter than it should. I opened it. The $50 bill I knew had been there was gone. My heart had sunk. There was only one other person who had been home all day. I found Ethan in his room, the glow of a video game on his face. When I confronted him, his eyes, those same eyes that would one day look at me with such cold indifference, widened with practiced innocence. He denied it, of course, vehemently. He accused me of being forgetful, of misplacing it. But I knew. I saw the lie, a flicker of it, deep within the blue of his irises. David had come home then, seen the look on my face, and known instantly. He was a man of quiet, unshakable principles. He wanted to confront Ethan, to force the truth out, to teach him a hard lesson about consequences. But I had stopped him. I put my hand on his arm, and I'd said the words I would come to regret for the rest of my life. Let it go, David. He's a good boy. He's just testing boundaries. Boys will be boys. I saw the disappointment in my husband's eyes. It wasn't anger, it was a deep, sorrowful disappointment in me. He saw the weakness I was showing, the path I was paving for our son. To end the argument, I told David I must have spent the money and forgotten. I lied for Ethan. I protected him from the consequences of his actions, from the firm, loving discipline of his father. I chose the easy peace of the moment over the hard work of building his character. I had taught him that lies worked, that I was an easy mark. The memory was so vivid I could almost smell the dinner David had been cooking, feel the worn linoleum of our old kitchen floor beneath my feet. And it brought another memory hot on its heels. Ethan's senior year of high school. The college application essay. He'd written a surprisingly profound piece about civic responsibility, full of eloquent phrases and complex ideas that seemed beyond him. We were so proud. David had been skeptical, remarking on the sudden maturity of his prose, but I had waved it away, basking in the glow of my brilliant son's achievement. A week later, a call from his guidance counselor. The essay had been flagged for plagiarism. Entire sentences, even paragraphs, were lifted from a little-known political journal. My first reaction wasn't shame or anger at Ethan. It was a fierce primal defensiveness. I marched into that school the next day and I fought for him. I argued that it was subconscious influence, that great minds think alike, that they were punishing a young man's potential over a minor, unintentional overlap. I was so convincing that I even convinced myself. The school, wanting to avoid a conflict, had let it go with a warning. Ethan was accepted into his first-choice university. He had faced no repercussions. I had rewarded his deceit with success. I hadn't just shielded him. I had become his accomplice. Lying there in the dark, the truth was a physical pain in my chest. I hadn't just given Ethan my money. I had given him the tools, piece by piece, over his entire life, to become the monster who could steal from his own mother. I had taught him that rules were for other people, that charm and deception were valid substitutes for hard work and integrity. I had smoothed his path, removing every obstacle, every difficult lesson, until he saw no difference between right and wrong, only between what he wanted and how he could get it. This fight wasn't just against Ethan anymore. It was a fight against the ghosts of my own failures, against the reflection in the mirror of the woman who had helped create him. The weight of that complicity was heavier than any legal defeat. It was the weight of a life's worth of regret. A week passed in a gray haze. Maya came by every day, trying to buoy my spirits, researching grassroots campaigns and media strategies, but my heart wasn't in it. My guilt had paralyzed me. What right did I have to seek justice when I had been an agent of the injustice? We were sitting at my small kitchen table, the air thick with unspoken tension. To give us something, anything to do, Maya had suggested we sort through my digital files. Ethan had helped me digitize everything years ago. Tax returns, medical records, bank statements, all stored in a cloud service I barely understood. It was a mundane, distracting task. Maya was at the laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard, while I sat beside her, pointing out what to keep and what to delete. We were in a folder labeled 2023 Financial, when she paused. "Here it is," she said, her voice flat. "The investment agreement. The gift document." She clicked it open. The familiar sterile layout of a DocuSign-style platform filled the screen. There, at the bottom, was my name, my signature, a clean digital replica of my handwriting. Seeing it felt like a punch to the gut. It was the weapon that had disarmed me, the proof of my own foolishness. I turned my head away. "Close it, Maya. I can't look at it." "Wait a second," she said, her voice sharpening with curiosity. She wasn't looking at the signature itself but at the metadata, the fine print at the bottom of the page. "That's weird. What is it?" I asked, my voice tired. "The audit trail," she said, leaning closer to the screen. "Every action is time-stamped. Document created, document sent to you, document viewed by you, and document signed. See, it says here you signed it at 2:15 p.m. on April 12, 2023. "That sounds about right," I said, remembering the day. Ethan had been there, rushing me, telling me his investors were waiting. "Yeah, but look at this," Maya insisted, her finger tapping the screen. "The final document, the one that was saved and certified as complete. The timestamp for that is 8:42 p.m. the same day. Why is there a 6.5-hour gap between you signing it and the document being finalized? That makes no sense. With these platforms, it's usually instantaneous." It was a small thing, a tiny crack in the smooth facade of the document. An anomaly. To me it meant nothing. But to Maya, a digital native who had grown up in a world of code and metadata, it was a loose thread, and she started to pull. "What else did you sign for him around that time, Grandma? Any other digital documents?" I searched my memory. He was going on and on about how I needed to get my affairs in order. He had me sign a power of attorney form. He said it was just so he could help me manage my finances if anything happened to me, pay my bills from his office to make it easier. He sent it to me through the same program. Maya's eyes lit up. A cold, dangerous fire was kindling in them. "Let's find it." For the next hour, she dove deep into the digital archives of my life. She searched through old emails, filtering by date, by sender, by attachment type. It felt like an archaeological dig, sifting through layers of digital dust. I watched her, a knot of nervous energy tightening in my stomach. It felt like something was about to happen, a slow seismic shift just beneath the surface of my reality. Then she found it. An email from Ethan dated April 10, 2023. 2 days before the gift agreement. The subject line was helping out. The body of the email was brief, full of his usual dismissive affection. Mom, here's that form we talked about. Just sign it so I can make sure your bills are always paid on time. Love, E. Maya clicked the link. A new document loaded onto the screen. It was a standard comprehensive power of attorney, giving Ethan sweeping control over my entire estate. And at the bottom there it was. My signature. Signed at 11:03 a.m. on April 10th. Okay, Maya said, her voice barely a whisper. Now stay with me. She arranged the two documents side by side on the screen. The power of attorney on the left, the gift agreement on the right. She zoomed in on the signatures, pushing the two images together until they were nearly touching. They were identical. Not just similar. Not just the same handwriting. They were pixel for pixel, flaw for flaw identical. The slight upward tilt of the H in Nevaeh, the way the S in Evans was slightly flattened, the exact pressure and flow of a pen stroke, perfectly replicated. It was a digital impossibility for a human being to sign their name twice with such microscopic precision. He didn't have you sign the gift agreement, Grandma, Maya said, her voice trembling with a mixture of horror and vindicated fury. He had you sign a power of attorney form. Then he lifted your digital signature, a simple image file, from that document, and pasted it onto this fraudulent gift agreement he created later that night. That's why the timestamps are different. He needed time to fake the document. I stared at the screen at the two identical signatures. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The blood drained from my face, a cold wave washing over me. All this time I had been drowning in guilt, believing I had willingly, foolishly, gifted him my life savings. I had berated myself for my weakness, for my complicity. But that wasn't the truth. The truth was colder, sharper, and infinitely more sinister. This wasn't a gift born of my foolish trust. It was grand larceny, a high-tech forgery, cloaked in the language of love and concern. Ethan hadn't just manipulated my heart. He had committed a felony. And Maya had just found the evidence. The chill that ran through me was no longer one of despair. It was the icy calm before a storm. This wasn't just a story anymore. It wasn't my word against his. It was a digital fingerprint. A life frozen in time. It was the weapon we needed. And I finally knew with absolute certainty exactly how I was going to use it. The lawyer's words still echoed in the sterile silence of my apartment. A verdict delivered in billable hours. Gift and unenforceable. They were just words, but they had the weight of iron doors slamming shut. For days I existed in that quiet, airless space, the ghost of my life savings haunting every corner. Ethan, my son, had built a fortress around himself with my money, my love, and my husband's soul, and I was left on the outside, peering through the bars of my own making. But grief has a half-life. It decays. And when it has burned away enough, what's left behind is hard and cold and clear. The final insult, the soulless microwaved birthday soup, had not broken me. It had fired me in a kiln, transforming soft clay into something that would no longer yield. I did not weep anymore. I did not rage. I moved with a quiet purpose that felt foreign and yet deeply familiar. I went to the bank, a place I hadn't visited in person for years. Not my local branch, but the old downtown institution. A granite beast with marble floors that clicked under my sensible shoes. I asked for access to my safe deposit box, number 314. The young clerk had to consult a dusty ledger. It had been my mother's, passed to me, untouched since her death a decade ago. The ritual was slow, deliberate. 2 keys, mine and the bank's, turning in unison. A heavy metal door swinging open into a small private room. The long tin box felt cold in my hands. I lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on faded velvet, were my mother's wedding pearls, a few brittle war bonds, and 3 thick envelopes sealed with wax. Inside each envelope were stacks of old, crisp $100 bills. My mother, a child of the Depression, never fully trusted institutions. For a rainy day, Nevaeh, her voice whispered from the past. A day when you can't trust anyone but yourself. It was pouring. I didn't count it there. I took it home, laying the money out on the very kitchen table where I had once signed away my future to Ethan. It wasn't a fortune, not in the world of venture capital and billion-dollar valuations. But it was mine. It was a seed. Maya came over that evening. I had the money stacked neatly. Her eyes widened. "Grandma? What is this?" "It's from great-grandma Eleanor," I said, my voice even. "It's our beginning. We didn't look for office space. We looked for a kitchen. We found one in an industrial park on the forgotten side of town, nestled between a plumbing supply company and a textile warehouse. It was small, ruthlessly clean, and smelled of bleach and stainless steel. It had a 6-burner stove, a walk-in refrigerator, and a set of steel prep tables that gleamed under the fluorescent lights. The rent was steep but manageable. I signed the lease without hesitation. "What are we going to call it?" Maya asked, her voice echoing in the empty space. We stood in the center of the room, the keys feeling heavy and real in my palm. I thought of David, of his hands, calloused from gardening and stained with turmeric. I thought of his notebooks filled with a lifetime of passion. I thought of the legacy Ethan had tried to steal, to sterilize, to package into a bland, marketable lie. "Legacy," I said. "Legacy meals." Maya smiled, a slow, brilliant sunrise of an expression. She pulled out her phone, her thumbs flying across the screen. A moment later she turned it to me. On a simple white background, in an elegant, classic font were the words, "Legacy meals. Soulfully sourced. Honestly made." It was perfect. It was a declaration of war disguised as a promise. We were the antithesis of Nourish AI. They had algorithms, we had memories. They had investors. We had my mother's rainy day fund. They had a brand, we had a truth. The first few weeks were a blur of logistics. Sourcing ingredients from the local farms David and I used to visit on weekends. Perfecting packaging that was sustainable and simple. Setting up a basic website. I moved like a woman half my age, fueled by a purpose that ran deeper than coffee. I didn't check Ethan's Instagram. I didn't think about Chloe's sneer. I thought about the precise amount of ginger needed to balance the sweetness of carrots in David's favorite soup. I thought about the satisfying weight of a well-made loaf of bread. My world had shrunk to the 4 walls of this kitchen, and in doing so it had become infinite. While I cooked, Maya worked a different kind of magic. She brought her laptop and a ring light to the kitchen. "Okay, Grandma," she said one afternoon, setting up her phone on a small tripod. "I need you to just do what you do. Pretend I'm not here." I was skeptical. "What on earth for, darling? Nobody wants to watch an old woman chop onions." "They don't want to watch an old woman chop onions," she corrected gently. "They want to watch you tell a story. They want to see your hands." My hands. I looked down at them. They were a roadmap of my life. Wrinkled, dotted with age spots, a small silvery scar on my right thumb from a forgotten kitchen accident years ago. They were the hands that had held my husband, raised my sons, and signed away my security. I had grown to hate the sight of them, a symbol of my foolishness. "Just make the lentil soup," Maya prompted. "The one you told me Grandpa made for you on your second date." So I did. I started by dicing the mirepoix, onions, carrots, celery. The rhythmic thud of the knife on the worn wooden board was a familiar comfort. Maya's phone was a silent, unblinking eye, but as I worked I forgot it was there. David always said the secret wasn't in the big, fancy ingredients. I began, my voice a little shaky at first. It was in the care you took with the simple ones. He would chop his vegetables so precisely, all the same size, so they would cook evenly. He called it building a foundation of flavor. He wasn't a fancy man, my David. He was a scientist. But in the kitchen, he was an artist. I added the garlic, the cumin, the coriander. The air filled with a warm, earthy scent. This spice blend, this was his attempt to recreate a dish we had on our honeymoon. We couldn't afford much, just a small trip to a little coastal town. There was a tiny family-run place that served a lentil soup that tasted like sunshine and history. He spent a whole year trying to get the spices right. He filled half a notebook just with his attempts. I let out a small laugh, a genuine one. This is version 37. The perfected one. I continued like that, my hands moving on their own, my mind drifting back through the years. I talked about David's research, not the technical parts but the passion behind it. His belief that food was medicine, that honest ingredients could heal. I wasn't selling anything. I was just remembering. Maya didn't say a word. She just filmed. Later that night, she showed me the result. It was a short video, no more than 90 seconds. She had edited it, adding soft, instrumental music. The video focused on my hands, the careful way I measured the spices, the gentle way I stirred the pot. My voice was a soft narration over the top. She had added simple text overlays. He called it building a foundation of flavor. A year of trial and error. Legacy meals. Recipe 37. I'm putting it on TikTok, she said, her expression serious. I barely knew what TikTok was. Isn't that for dancing teenagers? It's for stories, Grandma, she replied. And you have the best one. I thought nothing of it. The next morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing incessantly on the nightstand. It was a series of texts from Maya. Grandma, wake up. Check TikTok. Now. You're not going to believe this. I fumbled with the phone, my heart starting to pound. I opened the app Maya had installed for me. The little red notification icon showed a number that made me gasp. 99 plus. I clicked on the video. 1.2 million views. 250,000 likes. And the comments were a tidal wave. Her hands. They've lived such a life. Nourish AI could never. This is real food. I'm crying over lentil soup. What is happening? The story about her husband, my heart. Real food, Grandma Nevaeh, I would buy anything this woman makes. I sat on the edge of my bed, the morning light streaming in, and read through hundreds, then thousands of comments. Strangers, people from all over the country were connecting with me with David's memory. They saw the truth that my own son had refused to see. For the first time since that horrible night at the gala, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen. We were inundated. The small batch of soup I had made was sold out within an hour of us officially launching the website. Then the next batch. Then the next. We had to start a waiting list. Maya became my director, my marketing genius. Every other day we would film. I made David's rustic tomato bread, telling the story of how he developed it to help a neighbor going through chemotherapy, who couldn't taste much else. The video hit 3 million views. I made his chicken and rice porridge, explaining his research into the gut-healing properties of bone broth. 5 million views. The hashtags Real Food and Grandma Nevaeh started trending. We weren't just selling meals. We were selling a story. A truth that people were starved for. We were a tiny David against Ethan's Goliath, but we were landing pebbles right between his eyes. We never mentioned Nourish AI. We never had to. The comments did it for us. This is what Nourish AI pretends to be. I canceled my Nourish AI subscription. This is my new meal service. I bet the son from the articles would hate this, LOL. Ethan and Chloe remained silent. I knew, through the grapevine of old family friends, that they were aware of us. They dismissed us as a cute little hobby, a sentimental flash in the pan. Their arrogance was a blindness I was counting on. They saw a folksy grandmother in an apron, not a calculated queen positioning her pieces on the board. Let them think that. Let them underestimate me. I had been doing it to myself for 73 years. I was done. My days took on a new rhythm. Early mornings at the farmer's market. Long days in the kitchen, quiet evenings reviewing sales figures with Maya. We hired our first 2 employees, a young culinary school graduate and a retired baker who lived in the neighborhood. Our little kitchen was humming with life. I still lived in the apartment Ethan paid for. The rent was a monthly reminder of his betrayal, a whetstone on which I sharpened my resolve. I lived my life quietly, a grieving widow running a small sentimental food business. I gave them no drama to react to, no public fight to engage in. I was a ghost in their machine, a slow-acting poison. The turning point came on a Tuesday. It started as an email to the generic info address on our Legacy Meals website. The subject line was just one word. Question. The body of the email was cryptic. I used to work for the competition. I know why your food tastes better. It's because you use actual food. If you're interested in knowing what they use, meet me at the Blue Cat coffee shop tomorrow at 2 p.m. Come alone. I'll be reading a book with a yellow cover. Maya and I read it over and over. It could be a trap, Grandma, she said, her brow furrowed with worry. Ethan could have sent this. Ethan is too arrogant for subterfuge, I countered, though my own heart was thumping. He would send a lawyer with a cease and desist letter, not a mystery man to a coffee shop. This is something else. This is a crack in the wall. I'm coming with you, she insisted. No, I said firmly. The email said to come alone. If this person is nervous, another face will scare them off. I will be fine. It's a public place. The next day I walked into the Blue Cat coffee shop, a knot of ice in my stomach. The place was half full, the air thick with the smell of roasted beans and steamed milk. And there he was, in a booth in the back corner. A man in his late 30s looking tired, nursing a cup of black coffee. In front of him was a paperback with a bright yellow cover. I slid into the booth opposite him. He looked up, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and determination. You're her, he said, his voice low. Nevaeh. And you are. My name is Daniel, he said, not offering a hand. I was the senior kitchen manager at Nourish AI. Until last month. I simply nodded, waiting. I was hired early on, he began, speaking quickly, as if afraid he'd lose his nerve. Back when the mission statement still meant something. We were sourcing from local farms, organic produce, grass-fed beef. We were doing what you're doing now. It was based on your husband's research. I believed in it. He took a shaky sip of his coffee. Then the second round of funding came through. The new COO, a numbers guy from some private equity firm, said we had to optimize the supply chain. That's what they called it. He gave a bitter, hollow laugh. First, they switched from local organic carrots to industrial grade from Mexico. Then the free-range chicken became frozen, factory-farmed poultry from who knows where. The final straw for me was the broth. We stopped making real bone broth. Too time-consuming. They brought in these giant plastic totes of a hydrolyzed vegetable protein concentrate from China. We just added water. My blood ran cold. He was describing the utter desecration of David's life's work. I raised hell, Daniel continued, his eyes flashing with anger. I showed them the drop in nutritional values. I told them we were legally obligated to update our ingredient lists. Ethan, he told me I didn't understand the big picture. He said consumers buy the story, not the product. And Chloe, she told me my negative attitude was not aligned with the brand's forward momentum. They fired me, made me sign an NDA. But I kept some things. He reached into the canvas bag at his side and slid a slim manila folder across the table. It didn't make a sound. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. Inside were copies of invoices, shipping manifests, internal emails. One set of invoices from a local organic farm, dated 2 years ago. Another set from last month from a massive, overseas food conglomerate for flavor enhancers, protein isolates, and dehydrated vegetable powders. There was an email from Chloe to the finance department with the subject line urgent cost cutting, explicitly directing the switch to the cheaper suppliers. It was a roadmap of their deceit. Why are you doing this? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Because they took something I loved, something I helped build, and they turned it into a lie, he said, his gaze steady and clear. And because my daughter has a severe nut allergy. Last week we found out they switched their almond flour supplier to a cheaper one that processes peanuts in the same facility. They never updated the allergen warning. It's not just dishonest anymore. It's dangerous. He looked at the folder in my hands. I can't go to the press because of the NDA. They'd ruin me. But you're telling the truth. I can help you. He became our serpent in Eden. He still had friends inside the company, other disillusioned employees who felt betrayed by the company's new direction, through a burner phone and encrypted messaging apps, all managed by Maya, who took to the world of clandestine communication with terrifying ease. Daniel fed us a steady stream of information. Delivery schedules, supplier complaints, lists of disgruntled customers. He told us about the software glitch that was causing a third of the meals to be delivered a day late, and the PR team's official script to blame it on unprecedented demand. He told us about the upcoming line of wellness shots that were little more than sugar water and artificial coloring. We were no longer just a rival brand. We were an insurgency, armed with the one weapon Ethan had discarded: the truth. We sat on the evidence, waiting. Maya and I knew this wasn't the final blow, but it was the ammunition. A quiet, deadly stockpile. The war was still silent, but the first shot was now locked and loaded. All we needed was the right moment to pull the trigger. The first sign of the tremor was a glowing article in a local Austin food blog. It was a small thing, a human interest piece about a grandmother's kitchen, but it was authentic. It spoke of my David, of recipes born from love, not algorithms. The comments section was a revelation. People were tired of sterile, shrink-wrap perfection. They wanted a story. They wanted food with a soul. Legacy Meals wasn't just selling food. We were selling my life story, David's legacy, one container of shepherd's pie at a time. Maya, with her uncanny understanding of the digital world, fanned that small flame. Our TikToks weren't slick. They were just me in my floral apron, flour on my cheek, talking about the day David first perfected his beef stew. The way the smell of rosemary always made him smile. The tremor grew. Our delivery radius expanded from our neighborhood to the whole city. Then we started getting requests from Dallas, from Houston. We were a local sensation, a tiny, authentic star burning brightly in the shadow of Nourish AI's cold corporate moon. We were stealing the very customers Ethan had courted. The health-conscious, the ethically minded, the ones who read labels and cared about origins. I watched him from afar, through the cold glass of my laptop screen. Maya would pull up articles from Forbes, from TechCrunch. There was Ethan, his hair perfectly coiffed, his smile a white slash of arrogance. He was asked about the rise of hyperlocal competitors like Legacy Meals. I saw his jaw tighten for a fraction of a second before the condescending smirk slid into place. "We love it," he said, his voice smooth as a snake oil salesman's. "It's a cute little charity project. It shows there's a real hunger for what we're doing, and we applaud any effort to get people eating healthier." A charity project. He called his father's life work, my life savings, a charity project. He dismissed me as a folksy grandma playing in her kitchen. The rage that rose in me was cold and sharp, a shard of ice in my heart. Maya saw the look on my face. "He doesn't see us, Grandma," she said, her voice low. "He doesn't see you. He just sees a gnat he needs to sweat away. Let him think that," I whispered, my eyes still fixed on my son's smiling, lying face. "Arrogance is a disease of the eye. It makes you blind to the cliff edge right in front of you." The sweat came a week later. Maya was tracking our competitors' data, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "He's doing it," she said, not looking up. "The board must be pressuring him. Nourish AI just slashed the price on their entire homestyle line by 30%. I walked over to stand behind her, looking at the graphs on her screen. Our lines trending upwards, and Nourish AI's, a massive flat plateau, now with a blinking red arrow indicating the price drop. "He's not trying to compete," Maya said, a worried frown creasing her brow. "He's trying to annihilate us. We can't match that price, Grandma. Our ingredients are real. They cost money. We won't try to match it," I said calmly. I placed a hand on her shoulder. "We will do nothing. We will hold our price. We will hold our quality. We will hold our nerve. But we'll lose customers," she insisted. "People will see the cheaper option and switch." "Some will," I conceded. "The ones who only care about the price. But the ones who came to us for the story, for the truth, they will stay. And Ethan will be burning through his cash reserves to sell his chemical concoctions at a loss. He's a unicorn, Maya. A billion-dollar company built on nothing but hype and my money. And when you cut a unicorn, it bleeds. It bleeds cash." The next few weeks were a war of attrition. Our sales dipped slightly, just as Maya predicted. I felt the knot of anxiety in my stomach, but I showed nothing. In our videos, I was the same calm, smiling grandmother telling stories, kneading dough. Our message never wavered. Sourced from the heart. Made with honesty. Meanwhile, Ethan doubled down. Another 15% off. A massive digital ad campaign. Nourish AI. The smart choice for your health and your wallet. He was hemorrhaging money trying to starve us out. But we were a hardy little plant with deep roots. He was a genetically modified tree with a shallow, rotten base. A storm was coming, and I knew who would be left standing. The mole, our anonymous former Nourish AI manager, had given us the weapon. It sat on a small encrypted USB drive that our lawyer, Mr. Davies, kept locked in his office safe. On it were the unedited supply chain manifests, internal lab reports, and damning email chains. The proof that wild-caught salmon was cheap, farmed tilapia from Vietnam, that organic chickpeas were the cheapest bulk legumes available, often stored in facilities with pest control issues. And the most damning file of all, the cross-contamination reports. The reports their own internal quality control had flagged and that management had ordered buried. Traces of peanuts in nut-free dishes. Gluten contamination in gluten-free meals. It was a time bomb. We met with Mr. Davies in his quiet, wood-paneled office. The air smelled of old books and righteous fury. He slid the small USB drive across the polished mahogany table. "The price war is softening them up," he said, his voice a calm, precise instrument. "Their financials are strained, and their board is getting nervous. It's time to introduce the viral contaminant." Maya leaned forward. "How do we do it without it leading back to us? Ethan would sue us for slander, even if it's true. He'd tie us up in court until we bled dry." "We don't do it," Davies replied, a thin smile touching his lips. "He will." He tapped a name on his legal pad. Mark O'Connell, known online as the Food Detective. He's a former FDA inspector turned YouTuber, has 3 million subscribers and the kind of credibility money can't buy. He does independent lab testing on popular food products. He's meticulous, ruthless, and his followers trust him implicitly. We'll make an anonymous delivery to his P.O. box. The drive and 3 of Nourish AI's most popular allergen-free meals. Purchased from 3 different stores to prove it's a systemic problem. There was a beautiful, cold-blooded logic to it. We weren't the accusers. We were merely providing the evidence for an unbiased judge to find the verdict. The package was sent. And then we waited. The silence was the hardest part. Every day felt like a year. The price war continued. Ethan on a podcast laughed about how the grandma core fad was fading. I kept cooking. Maya kept filming. We kept telling our story, waiting for another much darker story to break. It happened on a Tuesday night. I was watching an old movie, and Maya was in her room supposedly studying. Suddenly I heard a sharp gasp followed by, "Oh my God! Grandma, you need to see this." I hurried into her room. On her large monitor was the YouTube homepage. The thumbnail was stark. A picture of a Nourish AI meal box next to a petri dish, with bold red text, "Nourishly. What's really in your healthy meal?" The video was 32 minutes long. It had been live for 1 hour and already had 400,000 views. We watched it together, huddled close in the glow of the screen. Mark O'Connell, a serious-looking man with graying hair and a lab coat, spoke directly to the camera. His voice was grim. "I get a lot of tips," he began. "Most of them are nothing. But a few weeks ago, I received a package so concerning that I've dedicated my entire channel's resources to investigating its claims." He cut to a montage. Him unboxing the meals, swabbing them, placing them in sterile containers. Time-lapse of lab equipment running. Then, he came back on screen holding up official-looking reports. The claims, I'm sorry to say, were not only true, they were an understatement. He went through it point by horrifying point. He showed the DNA results on the salmon that proved it was tilapia. He showed the microscopic images of insect fragments in the organic quinoa. And then came the final devastating blow. Nourish AI sells a line of meals specifically marketed as allergen-safe. We tested their certified nut-free pesto chicken. And we found significant levels of arachidonic, a major peanut protein. He put the report down and looked at the camera. The silence in his studio was deafening. "To a child with a severe peanut allergy," he said, his voice shaking with controlled anger. "This isn't a labeling error. This is a loaded gun." The video ended. The view counter was already climbing past 1 million. The comments were a waterfall of pure outrage. "My son has a peanut allergy. We have these in our freezer. I've been feeling sick for weeks. I thought it was just me." Lawsuit. The media storm was not immediate. It was instantaneous. It was a nuclear bomb detonating in the heart of Ethan's empire. By morning, Nourish Lies was the #1 trending topic worldwide. Every major news network was running the story. The FDA and the Austin Health Department announced a joint investigation and raided Nourish AI's central kitchen. Stock footage of officials in hazmat suits carrying evidence boxes out of the gleaming facility played on a loop on CNN. I watched Ethan and Chloe try to leave their mansion, swarmed by a sea of reporters shouting questions. My son, the titan of industry, looked small, haggard. His eyes were wide with panic. Chloe hid her face behind a ridiculously expensive handbag. They looked like what they were, cornered, guilty children. There was no joy in watching it. Just a profound, grim sense of finality. The fire I had started was now a raging inferno, and it was burning my son's world to the ground. He had built his house with stolen bricks on a foundation of lies. It was never meant to stand. The collapse was faster than anyone could have imagined. Lawsuits, hundreds of them, bloomed overnight. Class action suits from consumers. Personal injury suits from those who'd had allergic reactions. Major distributors pulled their products. The investors who had lauded Ethan as a visionary now saw him as a toxic liability. They fled like rats from a sinking ship. Nourish AI was in a complete, irreversible freefall. This was when Mr. Davies made his move. He didn't file another lawsuit. A lawsuit would be just one more drop in an ocean of litigation. He requested a private, emergency video conference with the entire Nourish AI board of directors. No Ethan. Just the money men. The ones who cared about one thing and one thing only: survival. I sat in Mr. Davies's conference room, a silent observer off camera, as he initiated the call. A gallery of panicked, grim-faced men in their 60s appeared on the large screen. They looked tired. They looked scared. Mr. Davies didn't waste time with pleasantries. His voice was as cold and sterile as an operating theater. "Good afternoon, gentlemen. I'm not here to discuss the salmon, the peanuts, or the impending wave of litigation that is about to render your company insolvent. I'm sure your own legal teams have already given you the bleak prognosis on that front." One of the board members, a man named Henderson who was the lead investor, scowled. "Then why are we talking, Mr. Davies? If you have a number in mind for your client, just say it." "My client doesn't want a settlement, Mr. Henderson," Davies said smoothly. "She wants justice. And that brings me to a different matter entirely. Private matter. One that predates the current public relations catastrophe." He shared his screen. On it was a crystal-clear image of the gift agreement for my $750,000, the one I had supposedly signed away my life savings with. Next to it, he brought up an image of the medical power of attorney I had signed a year prior when I had a small surgery. He zoomed in, placing the signatures side by side. They were identical, pixel for pixel. "Forensic analysis confirms it," Davies said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "The signature on the gift agreement is a digital forgery. A copy-paste job. A very clean one, I'll admit. But forgery nonetheless." A stunned silence fell over the virtual boardroom. The men stared, their faces draining of color. They understood the implications immediately. This wasn't a civil matter anymore. "This document," Davies continued, his tone methodical, "was used as the foundational asset to secure your first round of seed funding. It was presented to you, the investors, as proof of capitalization. This means the forgery wasn't just used to defraud an elderly woman. It was used to defraud you. That, gentlemen, is not just a breach of fiduciary duty. It is a federal crime. Wire fraud." He let the words hang in the air. Ethan Holt used a forged document to fraudulently obtain investment capital. The penalties for that include up to 20 years in federal prison and substantial fines. And as board members who benefited from and oversaw this transaction, a sufficiently motivated prosecutor could argue for your indictment on conspiracy charges. Henderson, the lead investor, finally spoke, his voice a choked rasp. What do you want? Mr. Davies leaned back in his chair, the picture of calm control. I'm here to offer you a choice. Not a bargain. A choice. Option A. We turn this evidence over to the U.S. Attorney's Office. Ethan goes to prison. The ensuing scandal guarantees that you, the board, will be financially and professionally ruined, and you'll spend the next 5 years of your lives fighting to stay out of jail yourselves. Nourish AI will be liquidated in a chaotic, public bankruptcy for pennies on the dollar, and its name will be synonymous with poison and fraud. He paused, letting them absorb the horror of that vision. Or, he said, his voice dangerously soft, there is option B. You engage in a controlled private bankruptcy. You cede all control to a trustee of our choosing. A shell corporation representing a silent third-party investor will purchase all of Nourish AI's assets, the brand, the equipment, the facilities, the customer data, everything, for a nominal fee. 10 cents on the dollar. You walk away with nothing, but you walk away free. Your involvement in the initial fraud is never made public. You get to survive. It was a masterstroke. He wasn't asking for money. He was offering them their freedom in exchange for the keys to the kingdom. I watched them on the screen. The blustering alpha males were gone. In their place were terrified old men, their empires of glass crumbling around them. They didn't even confer. Henderson looked at the others, saw the same desperate fear in their eyes, and gave a single sharp nod. Option B, he croaked. We choose option B. The call ended. The screen went black. I sat in the silence of the room, the hum of the air conditioning the only sound. It was done. The entire multi-billion-dollar edifice my son had built on a foundation of my love and his father's soul was now mine. A few weeks later, a truck delivered several sealed boxes to my small apartment. Inside were the assets, legal deeds, equipment manifests, data drives. And at the bottom of the last box, wrapped in archival paper, were David's journals. All of them. I lifted one out, the worn leather cool against my fingertips. I ran my hand over his familiar, neat handwriting. The smell of old paper and ink filled my lungs. It smelled like home. It smelled like truth. The empire was mine. The legacy was safe. But there was one last piece of business. One final invoice to deliver to my son. In person. The seasons had turned. The chill of autumn that mirrored the winter in my heart had given way to a tentative spring. 3 months. A lifetime. The glass and steel tower that once housed Nourish AI, a monument to my son's ambition and my ruin, had been exorcised. The cold, minimalist lobby, once decorated with abstract art that meant nothing, was now warm and inviting. The air no longer smelled of industrial cleaner and stale coffee, but of roasting garlic, fresh-baked bread, and simmering stock. It smelled like my husband's kitchen. It smelled like home. We called it Legacy Meals, and the name was a promise, carved into the reclaimed wood of the new reception desk. I couldn't know for certain what Ethan's life had become, but I could imagine it. I pictured a small, soulless apartment on the forgotten side of town, the kind with thin walls and the constant hum of a failing refrigerator. I imagined the designer suits, once his armor, now hanging like ghosts in a closet, sold one by one for grocery money. The luxury car repossessed. The friends vanished. Chloe, I'd heard through the city's quiet grapevine, had taken what little was left and filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences, the legal term for a depleted bank account. All that was left was the man himself, hollowed out by his own greed. So when our new automated HR system sent out a mass email for a mid-level opening, I knew his desperation would be a fish hook. Kitchen Operations Manager. The title was just corporate enough, just important sounding enough, to appeal to the phantom limb of his former ego. It promised a chance, a way back from the abyss. For a man with nothing, a flicker of hope is a powerful lure. He would have clicked apply without a second thought, his pride swallowed by the gnawing emptiness in his stomach. His resume, a graveyard of achievements built on my money and David's genius, must have been flagged by the system, and Maya, my brilliant, sharp-eyed granddaughter, had brought it to my attention with a grim, knowing smile. "Look what the cat dragged in," she'd said. "We sent him an interview time. The bait was set." He arrived at 10 a.m. sharp. I watched him from my office window, which overlooked the main entrance. He wore a suit, but it wasn't one of his old ones. This one was cheap polyester, a size too big in the shoulders, the color of a stormy sky. It was the uniform of a man trying to cosplay a life he no longer lived. He paused on the sidewalk, his eyes fixed on the Legacy Meals logo. I saw his body go rigid. The slight slump in his posture straightened with a jolt of recognition, of confusion, of dawning horror. For a moment I thought he might turn and walk away, but he didn't. He couldn't afford to. He smoothed his tie, a gesture that was once confident but now seemed fragile, and walked through the glass doors. He was met not by a cold receptionist behind a marble slab, but by a cheerful young man named Ben, who offered him a cup of coffee. Ethan looked startled, as if simple kindness were a foreign language. He was led through the heart of the building, a place he had designed for silence and efficiency, now transformed. The open-plan office space buzzed with collaborative energy, but the real shock came when they entered the main production kitchen. This had been his sterile laboratory, a place of nutrient pastes and chemical flavorings. Now it was a cathedral of culinary arts. Huge copper pots bubbled on industrial stoves. Chefs in clean white coats chopped vegetables with a rhythmic beat, their laughter echoing in the high-ceiling space. The air was thick with the aroma of life, of real food made by real people. This was David's dream. A dream Ethan had twisted into a sterile, soulless algorithm. Now it was real and he was a trespasser in it. Ben led him toward the back of the kitchen where a temporary stage had been erected. A crowd of employees, our entire team of over 100 people, was gathered, along with a handful of local journalists and food bloggers Maya had invited. A camera on a tripod had a small red light glowing. It was our monthly town hall, live-streamed to our social channels. Ethan's face went pale. He looked like a cornered animal, his eyes darting around for an escape that didn't exist. Ben gestured for him to take a seat in the single empty chair in the front row. I walked onto the stage to a round of warm applause. I wasn't wearing a power suit. I wore simple black slacks and a crisp white chef's coat, embroidered with the Legacy Meals logo and, underneath it, in small simple script, "In memory of David." I smiled at my team, my family. I spoke about our recent successes, about a new partnership with local farms, about the spirit of community we were building. I didn't look at Ethan, not yet. I let him sit there. I let him marinate in the reality of what he had lost, of what he had thrown away. Then my voice softened. As we grow, we remain committed to the values this company was built on. I said, my eyes scanning the crowd. Authenticity, honesty, and honoring our roots. That's what a legacy is all about. I paused, and then I finally let my gaze fall upon my son. We have one final crucial position to fill today. An opening for someone to help manage our kitchen operations. Ethan, thank you for coming. A murmur went through the crowd. Phones were raised, their small lenses glinting in the light. Ethan's face was a mask of disbelief. He looked from me to the crowd and back again, his Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. He started to stand, perhaps to protest, to flee, but my calm voice held him in place. From a small table on the stage, I picked up a heavy industrial-grade apron. It was made of thick gray canvas, stiff and new. My late husband, David, the soul of this company, didn't start his career as a celebrated scientist, I said, holding the apron up for all to see. He started as a dishwasher in a small diner. He believed that there was no job more honorable than cleaning the plates that had nourished people. He said it kept him humble and connected him to the simple truth of his work: feeding people well. The room was utterly silent. The only sound was the gentle hum of the ventilation system. I walked to the edge of the stage, directly in front of Ethan. In his honor, I continued, my voice clear and steady, we have created a new vital role. We are not hiring a kitchen operations manager. We are hiring our first ever chief sanitation engineer. I held the apron out to him. Humiliation and desperation waged a war across his features. His face flushed a deep blotchy red. His eyes, once so full of arrogant fire, were now just two dark empty holes. He was a king deposed, standing in the ruins of his own kingdom, being offered a rag. But he was also a man who hadn't eaten a decent meal in weeks. A man whose rent was due. The crowd watched. The camera watched. The world watched. He looked at the apron, then at my face, searching for something. Pity, mercy, a sign that this was a cruel joke. He found none. He found only the calm, quiet finality of a debt being paid. Slowly his hands rose. They trembled as he took the heavy canvas from me. His fingers, which had once signed billion-dollar deals, fumbled with the simple strings. He stood up, a puppet whose strings had been cut, and numbly, mechanically, he put the apron on over his cheap, ill-fitting suit. It hung on him like a shroud. I stepped back to the microphone, the live stream capturing his shame for every one of his former colleagues on LinkedIn to see. My voice was not triumphant. It was not filled with rage or glee. It was as placid as a deep lake. Welcome to the team, Ethan. I let the words hang in the air for a single agonizing beat. I saw the flicker of something in his eyes. Not hope, but a desperate animal relief. The worst was over. He had submitted. He would survive. Then I leaned in a little closer to the microphone. And now for your first official act as an employee, you're fired. Get off my property. The collective gasp from the crowd was sharp and sudden. Ethan just stood there, stunned, his mouth slightly agape. The apron seemed to grow heavier, pulling him down. Before he could process it, two of our security guards, both kind but firm men, were at his side. They didn't grab him. They simply flanked him, their presence an unmovable wall. One of them gently touched his elbow. The message was clear. They escorted the stunned, speechless Ethan off the stage, through the silent, parted crowd of my employees, and out of the kitchen. I didn't watch him go. I turned my back on that chapter of my life and faced my people, my true family. The silence broke and a wave of applause, of cheering, washed over me. It wasn't the sound of a cheering mob. It was the sound of relief, of justice, of a family celebrating that their home was finally safe. The camera zoomed in, capturing the calm, resolute set of my jaw. The kitchen hummed around me, a symphony of honest work, a testament not to revenge but to restoration. The legacy was finally truly safe.